everyone. My name is Byron and I'm an alcoholic. So grateful to be here. I consider this meeting home, and any meeting home, as a matter of fact. I always feel like I'm around my people, and I'm in a very safe spot. And the only newcomers today, or any newcomers to this program, keep coming back. I love you, and to be honest, I didn't really want to come this morning to share. I tried to justify everything. Last night I didn't sleep, and I was in a lot of pain. I got a set of false teeth on Friday, and I took them out because I didn't want them popping out whilst I was showing. That would be a bit of a problem. But here I am, and that's what I guess this program has always taught me, is to get up and show up no matter how I feel, and try to do the next best right thing. I guess I got to share a bit of my story. How it was, what happened, what it's like now. So I grew up in a good family. There are a religious family, but I was surrounded by alcoholics from the start. Just by me saying I'm an alcoholic in the beginning of each year, that's so relieving for me, because I know what I am, and it's something I resented my whole life, as being an alcoholic, because of my dad, my grandfather, who drank himself to death, and my uncles and stuff like that. I started, like I said, I grew up in a good family, and I got introduced to alcoholism from a young age, and I saw it with my grandfather and my dad, and that's when the resentment started, towards alcoholics, and I kind of brushed it aside. I fixed off other things. What I fixed off at a young age was sports. Sports became my everything, and became my way of fitting in, dealing with the fears, and I carried that throughout my childhood, I suppose. And I remember going to an all-boys school, and sports was my thing. I didn't really care about anything else, and also got affirmation from it, and I found a group where I could just fit in and stuff like that, and that became my everything. And I remember when I was 16, I think this was a life-changing moment for me. I started getting bumps on my face, and I didn't know what it was. And then I went to any dermatologist, and then I found out I had a rare skin disease. And that's when the first time I asked myself, why me? And why do I have to go through this? And at the same time, I had to stop sports. All the people in my school, I thought my friends, they started teasing and bullying me, and I went into a really bad place. I do believe in trauma and depression, but I also do believe that myself as an alcoholic, I weaponized those two words. At this moment in my life, that traumatic moment, I went into a lot of depression. I remember isolating myself, not going to school. My parents took me out of school for a term, and throughout my high school career, I cried myself to sleep every night. And I started resenting the world as well. I started resenting God, especially why did I get cursed with this disease? And I resented the people who teased and bullied me, and by isolation, that just my disease loved that. It just blew everything up. And somehow I passed school. I don't know how. Cheated in all the tests. But I passed high school, and then after school I was like F everyone, I'm gonna go to a place where no one knows me, and I can just do what I want. So I became that kind of person. And throughout I had my first drink when I was 15, and I'll never forget. I was in Salt Rock. I went there to a party, and I got blackout drunk straight away. This was before all the events in my life happened, and I remember not feeling anything and not caring. And I didn't drink for a while after that. And then when I got my skin disease, I went into isolation. I didn't go out. I didn't drink. I was introduced to meds at the time, but I wasn't really into them. I just wanted to be away from everyone. And then school finished and I went to varsity college, or VC, I called it vacation college, and I could just, there I got introduced to drugs, and as soon as I went to varsity, my mind went back to that first drink. It's like, I can drink and not feel anything and not care what people think about me. And that's what I straight went back to. And then I started drinking like a lot throughout varsity. And I got it, I don't know, like, I've done well, like I didn't do bad in varsity. I failed some of the subjects. I actually switched what I studied because I was going to accounting pretty high all the time and it didn't work out well. So I switched over and I found something I love to do and I've done it and I finished. And after that I was like, I need to get out of this place because I still carried that resentment with me. It never ever went away as much as I tried to tell myself it did. That's where I guess the baffling part of the disease is. And then I went to the UK. And I studied in the UK for a year in London, and that's when my life started becoming like really unmanageable. I'd still go to work, but I'd never be able to pay rent towards the end. And like all my relationships I was losing, especially with my housemates at the time. And then I decided to come back. And I guess this is where things like got really unmanageable in my life. I came back to live with my parents, and at that time, I was always looking for something to fix me, like fix the way I felt, and just make me feel better, and not care what damage it does to other people. And I came back from London, moved into my parents, and when I was in London, my parents they fostered a girl, a daughter for them, and I met her, and we started getting along a bit too well, and we got in a relationship, a dishonest relationship. And my parents ended up finding out, and I didn't care. Like at that time, it destroyed my family, and I didn't care. I took out the family, we moved out to our own place. Everyone in my family, every single one of my friends were like, "Byron, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'll show you. This is going to fix me. Like I don't care what you guys say." And I made it all about me. And my parents didn't speak to me for a year after that. And at the same time, I had to change careers. I went into a career I actually really enjoyed doing. And then, like the relationship went well at first. But then I guess alcoholism started kicking in, and I started putting my substances before her and not really caring at all. And that went on for almost 4.5 years. And then I remember going, because I made the decision to take out the family, I was like, I can't cheat on her. But I was so delusional because I was cheating on her every single day with substances. But I didn't see it as that at the time. And I remember telling her to go out with her friends so I could use. And she went out and she didn't come back. And then I went out to go find her, and I caught her cheating on me. And I was like, that I don't know, that like broke me at the time. And at the same time, I was on a dive, my whole career was diving, and I was on a dive job in Durban Harbour. And I lost one of my best friends, like right next to me. We both went down on the job together, and I came up and he didn't. And that whole experience, like those two things, it made a lot of trauma in my life. And I couldn't live with it. I remember telling my family I need to get away, telling my work I need to get away because of everything. And they actually funded my holiday, and I'll never forget that. I went to my parents' retirement village, which is in Donny, or Pennington, and I ran around there for a week on drugs. Like going to yoga Pilates in the morning on drugs with 80-year-olds. It was insane. And then I came back here, and then I went to my work, and I was like, I quit, screw you guys. I've had enough of this. And then I went down to Sodwana for 10 days, and just to get over everything. And I remember just sitting in my tent for those 10 days. I went to the beach once in those 10 days, and I just like cried and used, and I was like, okay, this has to change. This has to change. And also, like, throughout my journey in life, I go back, like, because I kept on asking myself, why me? And from the age of 16, I spent a month or two in hospital every year. Because my skin disease that I have, there's no known cure and there's no known cause. So there's why me's, and so they just got bigger and bigger and more. And at the time when I came back from Squad 1, I was like, why me? I maybe need to change the picture. And that was the first time maybe I thought like I wanted to change, but I also wanted to get people off my back, because people started noticing, hey, there's something wrong here, and this is not normal. So I started going to psych wards. For that following year, I went to 4 psych wards. I RHD'd or ran away from one. The first one I went to after night, and then the next 3 ones, like. They did destroy my life, but at the time I thought it was amazing. I could go to a place and they could give me meds. Like, meds was like, that's when meds became a part of my journey, and I didn't see it at the time. But I go to the psych ward and they'd dose me up on. The first time I went there, I left my substances at home, went to the psych ward, and they just gave me meds, and it was like a retreat. So I just lay in bed, watching DSTV, had a self-service kitchen. Thought it was amazing, and then 2 months later, as I got out of the place, I went straight back to my substance, and then I was introduced to meds, and then like 2 months after that, I was like, I need to go to the psych ward again, took my substances within me, and then back on the meds, and everything just started falling apart, like my whole life, and yeah, I went again, and they even, at the psych ward, they let me out on Wednesdays for good behavior. And I used to tell my mom, listen, she used to fetch me, and I'd make sure my dad never fetched me, because my dad is one of us. So like the saying says, you can't bullshit a bullshitter. Like, I could not manipulate my dad at all. Like, he saw right through me, and I resented him because of that as well. But yeah, mom would fetch me, take me home. Mom, I need to go see my friends, straight to the dealer, get my substance, go home, straight back to the psych ward. And that was like a cycle for a year. And after that year, I was like, this South Africa is a problem. Like, there's a big problem happening around here. I need to get out of here. And then I went to Vietnam for a year. And I remember, like, making my first promise to myself on my way to Vietnam. It was like, I told my mom to drop me off at the airport at 8 o'clock, and my flight was at like 4:30 in the afternoon. And I sat in King Shark airports in the bathroom using that whole day, and I promised myself at the end of the day I'm not going to touch any substances ever again. But alcohol was never the problem. Alcohol was like, at the time, was like, okay, cool, this is awesome. And drank on the plane off to Vietnam, and got to Vietnam, and I had to, like, I couldn't live with myself, those feelings. So I had to numb them at all costs, and then I started drinking heavily. And I remember, like, it was my 3rd week at Vietnam, and I was in this like house share, and his girlfriend came from South Africa there, and he asked me, he walked into the house and was like, do any of you guys smoke weed? And I remember, like, from that big promise I made myself, I'm never touching substances. I just remember, like, for like a brief second, I was like, I'm not going to do this. And like a second after that, I was like, bro, where have you been my whole life? I'm so happy, yeah, smoking. I was straight back into it. And luckily, when I was in Vietnam, like, my substances of choice was stimulants, and there wasn't much stimulants there. So I thought it was okay. What I was doing was okay, drinking every night, going out partying, and it really wasn't. But yeah, I remember, like, the first time I think I really knew that I had to, like, really change, and at the point I was 11 months into Vietnam, and I went to, like, this coastal city with 2 of my housemates, and the first night there, I arrived there, and this guy came and he said, listen, I'm selling some coke, and it's like, yo, I haven't done this for 11 months. You know, let me just buy 2 actually. And then I asked him for 2. Went straight back to the room, opened it up, and I saw it was like yellow powder. And then I was like, okay, hold on, this is not coke. And then I was like, okay, I'm in Vietnam, it's opiates, this is heroin. And like my whole life, I promised myself I'll never do heroin. Like I was like so against it. And then I was like, okay, this is heroin. I promised myself I'm never going to do this. That's me, I'm not going to touch it. And literally that, like 5 seconds later, I was like, I bought these drugs, I'm going to use them. And I did. And after that first night, the next morning, like I woke up, I couldn't remember much, and then my 2 friends threw me, listen, you've caused so much cut last night, we're going back to the house. And I was like, okay, cool, well, leave me here. And I went to my wallet, found another bag, and I carried on using for the next 2 days. And I don't know, I thought I was like, at that moment I thought I was going to die. I was like so sick, I was coughing everywhere, and I just carried on using. And I had like I had a lot of awakening, and I was like, yo, this is, like I've gone against everything I've promised myself my whole life here. And that moment I knew there was a big problem. So what I did was I went back to the house, phoned my mom, and I said, Vietnam's a problem, I need to come home. And literally 2 weeks later I was back at home, and I'm actually, like, in a way I'm grateful I came back at that time, because at the end of that month, I came back in December, it was 2020, 2019, and COVID got released in that January. So luckily I just missed all the borders closing and stuff like that. But the thing is, I had to move back in with my parents, and I remember getting back, and in the time in Vietnam, I think alcohol was like, my life became unmanageable because of alcohol. And I came back, and I still had that huge resentment towards my dad, and I saw in that year that his alcoholism had progressed. And I don't know, on that New Year's, I said to myself, I'm never going to drink again. Because I had such a huge resentment towards alcoholics, and that was actually the last drink I had. But what I done with it was like, I'm not going to drink again. You know, my dad passes out on the couch at 7 o'clock every night. I'm going to use drugs, and I'm going to stay awake all night, and I'll show him because I'm better than him. And I was stealing his stuff. Like, stealing was also throughout my life. Like, I could hardly ever afford my own stuff, and even when I did have a good job, and the more like I earned from a good job, the more problems I had in my life. The quicker I'd run out of money. It was weird how it worked like that. But yeah, then I was with my parents, and lockdown started, and I had no way of funding, and that's when the stealing like really began. I started cleaning out the house, and they noticed, like they knew what I was doing. They went to, like I'm from Toti, they went to all the pawn shops in Toti, and they gave me my ID, they banned me from all of them. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll go to the bluff. And yeah, that was my last year in active. That's just how the cycle went, I guess. Just waking up in the morning, finding something to steal, going to go sell it, going straight to my dealer, and getting my next fix. And whilst as I'd get that fix, like I would think about how am I going to get my next fix. Like that mental obsession, the last year was insane for me. Like my whole life just became obsessed about using and not feeling anything. And then I went, and then like how I came into this program was, I promised myself, and then every night that the next morning I'm not going to do those things. And I'd wake up in the morning and I'd do them. And at the same time, I was, in the last year of active, I didn't speak to my dad. I was physically abusive towards him. I like beat him up every second night. And also my mom, I was emotionally abusing my mom. My mom's got dementia, and I was using that dementia against her. Like I'd steal from her and say, what are you talking about? Like, are you mad? You're crazy, you got dementia. And yeah, sorry. And that's the kind of person I was. And like, because of that, my mom's dementia was caused from stress, and her dementia was progressing rapidly throughout that year. And my dad's drinking as well, because yes, I was resentful towards me, but he was an alcoholic, and he was also resentful towards me as much as I was resentful towards him. And then I remember in January, and my parents went away to Cape Town for 2 weeks on a holiday. And usually, like, my family would take me on every holiday with them because they were too scared to leave me at home. Otherwise, they would have to, because they knew I'd clean up the house. So they gave me a lot of money, and off they went. And after the first week, their money ran out, so I was like, I need to make a plan. So I went to the safe, and I sat in front of their safe for like almost 2 days, and I figured out the code, and I opened the safe, and the first thing I saw was a gold bracelet. And I saw the gold bracelet, and I was like, okay, it's like, that looks old, it must mean something to my family. Sure, wonder what it is. And then literally like 10 seconds later, I was like, I'm going to get a lot of money for drugs for that. And off I took it, went to the pawn shop, and they offered me a lot of money for it. And I had the same thing, like the same thoughts. Yes, it's a lot of money, like this thing's valuable, like what is it? And then 10 seconds later, I was like, whoop, on the way to the dealer. And I didn't even know what it was. And then my parents came back from Cape Town. They looked around the house, and they noticed nothing was missing. And at the same time they were away in Cape Town, I managed to get COVID, and it was the first strain, so I was like quite man down. And then I gave it to them. And then my parents, like, they got really sick from it. And I remember sleeping, like, I had to sleep in separate rooms, and I slept outside my mom's room. Like every night, so I put a mattress there, because the truth was I had so much guilt and shame, because I knew that I either got COVID from 2 people, either the dealer or the guy at the front desk of Cash Crusaders. And I was like, it couldn't be the guy from the front desk because he's working there, so he couldn't have COVID. So I was like, shit, I've got COVID from my dealer, and I've been to my parents. Like, what happens if something happens to them? And that guilt and the shame, that's, I carried guilt and shame throughout my life, but that time was quite overwhelming. And at the same time, my brother had a daughter, and my brother asked me to be the godfather. And when he asked me that, I accepted it, and I was like, and I promised myself, like, I made a huge promise to myself, I'm going to try to be the best godfather I can. I'm not going to do any, like, thing of my old ways. I'm not going to steal. I'm not going to use, and I just couldn't stop. And with that came a lot of guilt and shame. And then when she was born, it was like a month after my parents arrived from Cape Town. My dad went into the safe, and he came to me. It's like, Byron, where's that gold bracelet? And I told him, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. As we do, I denied everything. And I asked him, wow, what was it? And he's like, no, it's a family emblem. His mom gave it to her mom on her deathbed and said that this is for your first grandchild, and give it to the day she's born. And the emblem was gone, and I couldn't believe at that moment in time what I'd done. The guilt and the shame became overwhelming. So what I'd done with that was I called all my family, all my relatives from all over, and I had a search party for like 2 days looking for those bracelets. Like, I love this saying, an alcoholic will steal something and deny they stole it, an addict will steal something and help you look for it. And I did for like 2 days. I got my whole family there, and I was helping them look for it, flipping over beds, and I knew exactly where it was. And and I had that guilt and the shame just was so overwhelming. At that moment in time, I didn't want to live. Like my whole life, I told my family, listen, I'm going to kill myself. But for me, that was a manipulation. But at that moment in time, I wasn't telling them that. I was thinking of it. And that's when I think God intervened. And I had like this God moment. And I was like, I don't know, I can't live like this. I can't put my family through this. And I went to my mom. And first time I got honest, I was like, listen, I sold the emblem for drugs. I've got a big problem. And she looked at me, she's like, I know you do. Like, you've had a problem for a while, you need help. And I was like, yeah, I know I need help, please send me for help. And yeah, I think that guilt and the shame had just gotten too much, because not only from stealing, you know, I was also in a dishonest relationship with my parents' domestic work at the time. And I couldn't live with that. There's so many things I had guilt and shame, things I couldn't ever talk of, but I can talk with them today because I've done those things. But this program has given me a new way of life. And when I asked my mom for help, so that's how it was. You know, as soon as I asked my mom for help, that's when God intervened in like amazing ways. And I had a huge resentment towards God at the time. But yeah, God has always been there throughout my life, and at that moment in time, that's when he just started working like magic. I remember asking my mom, and then 6 months before I went into treatment, like my best friend, like since grade 2, he came to stay at my place because he was kicked out of his parents' place. And after the first night staying there, I was like, this is dodgy, you know, 2 addicts in one place. He was a bit messed up, I was a bit messed up. I was like, we're going to get caught. So that the first night I kicked him out of my parents' place. I drove straight to his mom's work, pulled his mom out of work, and I said, listen, your son's got a problem, he needs help, he needs to go to rehab. And that was a huge deflection from my side. And his mom took him off to rehab. And then when I ended up asking my mom for help, she was like, okay, cool, let me phone my friend's mom. And she phoned him, and then his mom was like, yeah, there's only one place your son needs to go, and that's up to the house on the hill. And then I was like, okay, cool. And I don't know what they told my mom, because my mom told me, listen, you're going to a retreat by the beach in Scottsboro. And I was like, this sounds awesome, because I've done many retreats in psych wards, so I thought it'd be the same thing, but it wasn't. And yeah, that was a Tuesday night, and then my mom said I'm going on a Wednesday, and I told my mom, I was like, okay, cool, I'm not going on a Wednesday. My goddaughter's just been born, I want to spend time with her. It's my dad's birthday on Saturday, and I want to be at his birthday. And I'll go on Monday. And then from that Wednesday to the Monday, just stayed in my many years. I didn't see my goddaughter, I didn't go to my dad's birthday. Because that's what kind of alcoholic was. I just missed out on everything. And yeah, ran out of time now. And then, yeah, that Monday, you know, I'll never forget this. I got told I was getting fetched at 10, and then the guy came and fetched me at 9. And I seen my driver, like, finish the end of the joint. He's like, right, take your time. And took him to the house, and, like, I'll sit there and, like, Rob carried the first message to me in recovery. I'm so grateful you know. Like, I'll never forget the moment. Like, Rob fetched me. I was so happy, and I was like, what's this so fun? And then the whole way to the treatment center, we go to the Scottsboro off-ramp, and like I got told there's facilities in Scottsboro, and I'm from the south coast, so I know like Scottsboro quite well. And we got to the off-ramp, and I was like, okay, we're going to go left here. The indicator went right, and I was like, faulty indicator, and the steering wheel started going right, and then went right, and I was like, where am I going? Through the sugar canes, through like the township, and then I honestly thought I was going to get dropped off in the bush and just left there and like fight for survival. And I was like, this is what my parents want of me. And yeah, I arrived in treat, and then I went through, like, I'll never forget going like up that driveway into the facility. when I arrived at the facility, I was still like resentful towards the world. I was a self-pity victim. Like nobody knew what it was like to be me. And yeah, I guess that's where things changed, you know, that's where my life was changed. Firstly, when I introduced you to the 12 steps, dealing with those resentments and the self-pity and the guilt and the shame. Like I remember arriving and meeting my sponsor, you know, my sponsor, like, he saved my life. I'm extremely grateful for him, and I'll always be extremely grateful for him, because when I trusted no one when I arrived at treatment. And I remember going to speak to him, like one of the first times, he was like, you've got to trust God. And I was telling him, not, bro. It's not happening. He's like, okay, why don't you start by trusting me? And I was like, okay. But I was also like, not. But then he started sharing his experience was like, he started sharing his experience with me, and I just could relate, and I could just, like, I could see something in him that I really wanted, and I was like, okay, let me just trust him and do what he says, do as we're told. And yeah, it's, I'm going to speed this up a bit. But yeah, when I arrived at treatment, I was under the impression, you know, it was like, I still got my family. Because my family, when I drove up to treatment, they were all outside waving goodbye to me and stuff, and I was like in the back, so the car showing the middle finger, because I was extremely resentful, because I was coming to treatment, they were going out to the Kruger Park on holiday, and I couldn't believe they were doing that to me. But yeah, and I remember coming to treatment and thinking, you know, I've still got my family. And then in my life story feedback, I remember everyone went around the room. There's a few people in here and had feedback, and at the end of that feedback, my sponsor just said to me, yo, you forgot to mention 2 things. And I was like, what? And he's like, yo, the first thing you forgot to mention is your ex-girlfriend's your foster sister. And I was like, oof, exposed. And then the second thing he mentioned was like, yo, your family are getting a restraining order against you. And I thought I'd had a rock bottom before that, but I hadn't. That was my rock bottom. I remember going out to my room and just seeing the pain on my mom's face of her going through that, like doing that, because she was my biggest enabler, and like she was my everything, and I couldn't believe my life had come to that. Like she was going to that measure to not see me again, and that's when I realized I really fucked up. And I had to change. Because I did love my family, it's just I didn't know how to love them. And I was doing all the wrong things. But thankfully, the steps helped me deal with that and change the picture. And that treatment facility really helps. I'll fast forward a bit to leaving the treatment center, going to the halfway house. I love the halfway. I believe the halfway house changed my life. I find good healthy relationships in the halfway house with good people, and I find like I got introduced to the program and to service, and it started giving me purpose, I suppose. And I'll never ever forget my first amends. When I arrived at the halfway house, I just prayed to God. I was like, I'll do any single like job, just not be a waiter. And the next morning, one of the girls from my house came to me and was like, listen, there's a job for you at the coffee shop, come waiter. I was like, oh no, God. And then off like 2 weeks later, because we had a little bit of a lockdown, off I went, and I remember on the way to the coffee shop, I was like, please, because I was still like, had a bit of an ego. I was like, please, God, please don't let me, like, don't let anyone I know see me at this coffee shop. And as I got to the coffee shop, I arrived there, I was mopping the floors, and an old couple walked in, and they were like one of the other best friends' parents, and they're like, Baba! And I was like, oh my God. And I was the most, like, so much humility in that moment. And they asked me, what are you doing here? And I was like, okay, I got to get honest. And I got honest to them, and they're like, yo, we're actually proud of you, which was weird, because not many people ever said they're proud of me. And then 4 months into the coffee shop, there was one of my exes came in, and one of my exes that like we ended things on a really bad note, and she went around town saying how much she hates me. When she saw me, she said she hates me, and she came to the coffee shop with her new boyfriend, or one of her new boyfriends, and I had to serve them. And that was something else. And then she asked me, like, what are you doing here? Because she knew where I was, she knew what I was working on doing, and I was like, I've got to get honest. And I told her, like, everything. And the last conversation we had before that conversation was her telling how much she hates me. And after, like, just being honest with her, she looked at me and was like, I'm so proud of you, Byron, and I'll never, ever forget that moment, because she was on the top of my, like, amends list. And God just presented that amends at that moment. Like, that's been my whole amends process in recovery, you know. God presents his moments. And yeah, the first year of recovery was amazing. I remember going to hospital. I was in hospital for the first time for a month. And I was like, as I arrived at the hospital, I was like, to be honest, I was like, yes, please. I'm away from the halfway house. I'm away from the Scopper Fellowship. I'm going to have a break from recovery. This is awesome. And the second day, I was lying in my bed in hospital, and I heard this loud English voice. And I'll never forget it. And I was like, I know this English voice. And like, I think we all do. And then I walked around the room, and there was Keith. And this was the most powerful message I've ever been carried to me in my recovery. And he didn't even say a thing. He was just sitting there on his hospital bed with this big book next to him. He had this other sober and sobriety, like black book next to the big book. And he was sitting there with his little iPad watching and listening to a share. And I just saw that, and I was like, this is how this oak's 37 years sober. Like, doing the right thing when no one is looking, literally. And I was like, hey, Keith. And then he's like, hey, Byron, like he does. And he's like, he told me to listen to the share, and I'll never forget that share. It's the history of AA by Jim Burwell. Jim Burwell's like one of the founding members. He's like, go listen to it and come back and tell me what it's about. And I went to listen to it, and in the share it was like, you know, in the first 6 months of AA, people were coming and going, but more people were actually going. But the original 8 people that stayed sober were all the people involved in service. And then I was like, wow, okay, like that's when everything changed in that moment. I think that's also when things changed for me in recovery. It's like I have to be in service, and I have to try to do the right thing when no one's looking. And that's what I've done, you know. I remember in the hospital as well, I had people from the fellowship, from the house, halfway house, come visit me every single day for their month. It was absolutely amazing. Like that's unconditional love and compassion. And, you know, that's when I was like, you know, I've got to keep giving it back to people in the program. And maybe you can do that by being of service. And, yeah, like my first year was in the halfway house. I'm going to get to my second year, because the second year was quite something. The first year in the halfway house was maybe, I'd say, but it was easy compared to the second year. The second year I had to take a lot of responsibility. And yeah, put my recovery first, and do the next best, try to do the next best right thing. And I guess it's been a crazy year, but an absolutely amazing year. Like, I've learned so much about myself, I suppose. Things I didn't ever think I'd know, or I don't know how to explain it actually. But yeah, I remember just throwing myself into service. Like, I was up in the Midlands, and like I remember throwing myself into this convention committee, and I just learned like principles of 4 person. I used to sit there at night, and James was my roommate. So I was like, James, come listen to this, and and I couldn't believe it. But then I had to be like, okay, no, it's not about me. Learn to make it about other people. And some of the magic moments in my second year of recovery was, I guess, I learned how bad an obsession is. I was like 18 months, and I went to my parents' place, and they had a family friend there from Mauritius, and she started flirting with me, and I was like, wow, today's the day. Started flirting back, and I was like, yo, this is it, you know. It's been 18 months, and And then, like, see, I started people pleasing. She's like, okay, cool, let's watch some series. And it was literally the worst series I've ever watched. And she was asking me, I was like, how's it? And I was like, this is awesome. And I stayed awake till 2 o'clock that morning watching the series I didn't like. And I remember her telling me, okay, good night. See you tomorrow. And she went to bed. And I was so resentful at that moment in time. It's like, how dare she? Like, what is going on here? And then I went to done my, and the thing is, I done my step 11 at like 7 o'clock that night because I wasn't letting my step 11 get in the way. And I just done a spot inventory at the time, and I was like, wow, why am I like this? And I was like, okay, people please, resentful now, I had expectations. That's an obsession. And I was like, okay, the next morning I'm going to a meeting, I'm going to go fellowship in Scotland. And the next morning I woke up and I was like, it's round 2. Like, today's day. And I don't know, I caught on to that, I jumped in my car and off I drove to this Sunday morning meeting. And I phoned my sponsor, and my sponsor was like, why did you send me your step 11 at 7 o'clock last night? And he knew, and I was like, well, about that. And then I just told him, and he's like, okay, get to a meeting, that's where obsessions get you. But that's what happened, when I'm obsessed over something, like, I completely forget about recovery. And I always have to remember that recovery has to come first, in everything. And also I went to one of the cool experiences this year. I guess I went to, I was away in Mauritius with my family, and I went to a meeting there, and I was telling, like, Wendy about the meeting earlier. It's like, I arrived at the meeting, it was a French meeting, and hardly any of them could speak English. And then they asked me to share. So I was like, okay. Then 2 minutes into the share, I was sharing, and I was like, these guys understand nothing what I'm saying. But then I just kept it simple, and they shared back at me in French. I understood nothing what they were saying. And then we done a literature study afterwards, like a 2-hour meeting, and the whole 2 hours I knew absolutely nothing what they were saying. But the thing is, I just felt at home at that meeting. It's an experience I'll never ever forget, because even though it was like the reading actually said, like all around the globe, I just felt at home, like being around my people. It was absolutely amazing. And yeah, I find like lots of purpose. I mean, this year in recovery, you know, I was been up in the Midlands, and like I had something on my mind, and I actually cool that one year, because she helped me like type out this message, and it's like the first time I posted, like, tragedy awareness thing. And from that moment, like, I always had to ask for help. I always needed help from someone else. I would have never done it by myself. After that, you know, I like find purpose in like raising awareness for things, and yeah, it's been one hell of a ride. And just before my 2 years, I came back. My 2 years was on a Saturday, and I came back home on the Thursday nights, because I had to go to the dentist on Friday, and on the way back there, my dad phoned me and was like, listen, Alicia's at our place. Like, I don't know how you're going to react to this, but I thought I'd let you know before you get there. And that's my ex-girlfriend. And I've always wanted to make amends to her. I remember like 10 months in the halfway house, she phoned me, and all she said was, listen, can you speak to my friend? And I said, okay, cool. And I spoke to her friend for it was like 35 minutes. And her friend had a brother who was going through addiction, and all she wanted was help and stuff like that. And I gave her some ladies' numbers in the fellowship. I explained to her about the meetings and stuff like that. And I thought I'd like done such a good job, you know, making amends. And the next morning, I remember my dad and mom phoning me, and they're like, did you speak to Alicia last night? And I was like, yeah, for about 5 seconds. And I spoke to her friend for quite a while. And I was like, why? She's like, no. She arrived at our place this morning with 2 blue eyes. She's been beaten up by her boyfriend at the time, because she was in an abusive relationship. And that's when I was like, sure. My sponsor always told me to make amends, just to stay away from her completely. And that was quite hectic, I guess, for me. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't following my sponsor's suggestion completely. And from that moment, I always wanted to make amends to her. And then she was at my parents' place that night, and I became very fearful. But I know when I'm fearful that like the faith that I have to have is just making it about others, and it takes away that fear. That's been my experience in recovery. And I got there and I just made it about her. Her new boyfriend was there, and he was actually like a guy, and I was genuinely stoked for her, like really happy for her. And I got to meet her new daughter, and she was like, this is your uncle, he's going to be your uncle forever, and it was like such an amazing experience. Like experiences like that remind me of wider recovery. And yeah, it's just here also, like I've asked a lot for suggestions from my sponsor. I've listened a lot to suggestions from my sponsor, but I've taken a while to follow them. And if I look back on it, my sponsor's given me the most amazing suggestions. Like I'll be on the phone and I was like, this is amazing, and then I'll just not follow them. And I'll go and get into such a bad place, a place of pain, and then alcoholism still brings me to my knees, and then I'm willing to do whatever it takes, and then I follow the suggestions, and things have just worked out like amazingly whenever I follow the suggestions. And when I question suggestions, I always got to bring it back to like my sponsor's been given suggestions by his sponsor, and his sponsor's been given suggestions by his sponsor, and those sponsors have been going for 80 years, the amount of time this program has been going for. So who am I to question those suggestions? And I still take a while to follow them, but that's all right. I've learned a lot, and this program's all about living and learning. And yeah, I'm extremely grateful to be here today. This is like my home group, place where I find recovery, and yeah, it's like I'll start off this year. If there are any newcomers or new people to the program coming back, I love you. Thanks for letting me share.